Welcome everybody to the group visit called No Pain, Total Gain. We're excited to be able to share with you some of the latest information on how to get ahead of pain. So let's talk about pain. You know, we think about pain differently as we go across our lifeline. Maybe in our 20s we had some minor pain, maybe a little bit of menstrual pain, or maybe we played a sport a bit too much, a bit too hard, little ibuprofen or acetaminophen might have taken care of it. Our pain was kind of interspersed quite infrequently. Maybe in our 30s we're having a little bit more, we're becoming a little bit more dependent on having that ibuprofen close at hand. And potentially in our 40s, 50s, we're starting to really depend on some sort of anti-inflammatory for our pain issues. Whereas into our 60s, we might see that we're now starting to really limit what we're able to do in life. You can't go with the grandkids to a theme park because you know that your arthritis will flare up. And this is the conversation that's really on the table about pain. And of course, we know that many people need far more serious medications for pain, and most of them don't want to be taking them. And so when we're talking about pain, I really want you to think about how pain varies between individuals. Have you ever noticed that some people, they seem to get their pain much earlier in life? So in their 20s and 30s, they're feeling pain like what you would think only a 60 or 70-year-old should be feeling. And then the thing is that they're probably not practicing something that we're going to call goodness. And then you have those people who are like 60s, 70s, 80s, living this juicy life, walking, hiking, traveling, with very little pain issues. What's their secret? Well, it's this thing we're calling goodness, and I want you to stay tuned because we're going to teach you about it. So let's talk a little bit about pain a bit more specifically. Where do we feel pain? Well, in this series, we're going to talk about musculoskeletal pain. And so we might be talking about nerve pain. Nerve pain might be that kind of pain that a diabetic might have in their feet or legs, that kind of buzzy, electric, shocky pain. Or maybe it's in the joint, that space between bones. Let's say a common example might be knee arthritis. It's the joint space that gets all ratty and inflamed. Or maybe it's actually in the bone itself. Maybe it's a cancer pain where some of the cancer has gotten to the bone and that's really painful all the time. Or maybe it's like a tendon type of pain. Hey, a common one would be like a rotator cuff tendonitis in that shoulder here, and it just flares with certain movements. Or maybe it's actually in the muscle itself, whether it's from an autoimmune condition or maybe you're exercising, you think you're doing it right, but somehow you're just sore in a bad way after exercise. So let's talk about this a little bit further. What's actually happening? How do we actually feel pain? You know, the simple scientific way to understand it is that something injures us. So let's say that I bump really hard into a person during a sports activity, and I bump up against that person, and let's say I get a bruise here on the skin surface. Well, you get an injury, but then you have this kind of electrical nervous system that relays the message from the site of injury to the brain and says something's going on out there in the arm in that deltoid area. And the brain then has to interpret and process this pain signal, this pain information, and then it sends it back and says, yep, something's wrong over here. And this, if it's done continuously, you can start creating memories and patterns in the brain. It's sensitizing to the pain signal. It's not a one and done. It's starting to create memory. So let's think of it kind of like pizza dough. We got to make this stuff a little simpler and easier to absorb. So let's say you're trying to make a good, healthy pizza. And here you are rolling out the dough, and you lift it up and you try to do that fancy thing that those pizza makers do, and you whip it around and all of a sudden there's a big hole punched into the pizza dough. Uh-oh. That's what the pizza guy says. He first notices, senses that there's a hole in the dough. And then he says, uh-oh. That's kind of like the brain realizing, uh-oh, something has been triggered and damaged. And then the brain says, listen, this wasn't a good scenario. And it kind of creates a memory and a pattern that we shouldn't do that again. So in the same way, the brain and the body have a specific way of healing that pizza dough or bump into the arm. So the first thing that happens is, like if you get a pretty good bump into the arm, or let's say you sprained your ankle, it gets red hot, swollen, painful, and then many times we can lose function. You're not going to want to walk on that ankle or move that arm the same way as you were before. Similar to that pizza getting punched, you're not going to be able to use it the same way when it has a big hole in the middle. And then, what's the next thing the pizza man does? Well, he or she is going to wad that dough back together. And similarly, the body is going to try to reconnect the area that was maybe torn, partially torn, bruised. It's trying to bring it back together again, reform connections. And then the next thing it's going to do is it's got to stretch it back out, kind of like you roll out the pizza dough again. Being mindful, I do not want to create another tear. And so it gets restretched into, as much as possible, its original form, and having those fibers and nerves be in their original direction. And if we do that correctly, if that process of healing and repair goes correctly, well, now we've got wonderful pizza dough ready to put on some healthy toppings and get it back to normal function so that you can enjoy the use of your deltoid or your ankle again. Now, why is it that that doesn't always happen? Why is it that sometimes an injury can turn into a long-term problem? This is the secret stuff coming up. Well, I'm going to tell you that if you have badness in your lifestyle, you're going to be more likely to push an injury that could have kind of started and stopped into start and keeps on going. We're going to call that chronic pain. So let's talk a little bit more about this badness. So badness, I want you to think about bad. Are you bad with yourself? What does that really mean? Well, think about MESS, mess. Is your kind of situation, relationship with yourself kind of a mess? Are you mentally kind of feeling conflicted, indecisive, not feeling like you really know what you should be thinking? Emotionally, are you feeling mad or sad or worried more often than you feel is right? And what about socially? Are you feeling isolated? Are you feeling that you don't have that support system in your life, or you don't have community, you don't have tribe to go to? Maybe it's a spiritual disconnect. Are you not good with yourself because you don't know what your purpose is here? Even though these things sound like warm, fuzzy concepts, if you are not good with yourself, so your mess is not in order, that's going to prime inflammation, and that's going to drive pain signaling to become more solidified. That memory and pattern of pain is going to stick in and take hold with roots. And so it's really important that we work on our mess. Now, if we get our mess in order, what's interesting is our nutrition starts to fall in place. But if our mess is a big mess, then nutritionally, we might be craving things like sugar and alcohol and caffeine, things that may not be great for us in the quantities that we're having it. Maybe we're eating too much fake food because it gives us this pleasure that's really not the kind that's good for our bodies. Or maybe we tend to overeat or undereat. That's what might happen with nutrition when we're messy with our MESS. And then what about exercise? I don't know about you, but when I don't have my mess in order, I'm more likely to be a couch potato. I'm more likely to have this droopy posture, and I'm more likely to kind of be tight in my neck and in my face. These aren't good for pain signal control. And then, of course, we have how we cope with stress. If we can't cope, or we're having poor sleep patterns, we're not waking up refreshed, and we're just kind of tired, malaise, blah, these are not good signals for the body. And when we have that type of signal, what it's basically doing, badness, is pushing a short-term acute pain issue into a long-term pattern of pain. That's what we're all trying to avoid. So what I want you to think about is, how does badness start to play in your life? Could posture be one of your issues? Maybe you really need to work on alignment. Sometimes you need to get some professional to help analyze your posture and see if you should be working. Because really we've got this 8 to 10 pound bowling ball on top of a coil. That's what our body is. Our head is landing on our spine. And if it's all bent, it's not going to go well. And so that's why many people either have disability or long-term pain from neck and back pain, because that coil or spring is not properly aligned. So this is just a diagram helping us understand how alignment and flexibility, if in proper order, work well, but if not, can really cause some significant pain. And so what do? We're kind of habituated right now to just address the effect of pain. We take a pain medicine, whether it's an ibuprofen or something stronger, to block the pain. And what we don't know is when we take that, we're blocking healing. And when we block healing, we're going to continue to get more pain and inflammation, more pain at the site of the arm or the ankle in the way that I described. And that's what makes that pain pattern persist long term, that badness. And so if that pain persists because you continue to need a medication that stops healing, well, that's how you become dependent on a medication. And then the cycle becomes a trap. You just keep needing more and more medication because you're not letting the healing and repair take place. Well, luckily, goodness is there. Remember, we talked about goodness. And goodness can stop the change of a short-term pain issue turning into a long one. Or if you have this long-term pain issue, let's get it back into a smaller one or make it go away. So let's talk a little bit more about goodness. And as you figured, it's getting your mess in order. So mentally, you're more at peace. You kind of have more feelings of joy. Emotions are about joy and being satisfied and content. And maybe socially, you really feel supported more often than not. And maybe you're just spiritually in a place of gratitude or faith. And these things create signals that really help stop the pain response. There's evidence to show this. And that if you could eat more veggies, and more specifically a rainbow of fruits and vegetables that are rich in fiber and those chemicals in those foods that really help stop the pain process, even better. Maybe you notice that you're dehydrated. This could be why you're having nerve or disc pain. Maybe you're realizing with goodness, you can stop eating when your hunger is taken care of, that you don't overeat. And maybe exercise-wise, you actually feel good enough to move. Having your mess in order makes it more likely that you're going to move, have better posture, have more alignment, be more flexible, not just mentally, but physically. And of course, when you have your mess in order, it's much easier to be resilient in the face of stress, have a better night's sleep, and wake up feeling alive and rested. So these are the kinds of things we need to bring into our life to change that brain pattern from being a long-term issue to being a healed-up short-term issue. We can't stop a trigger for pain many times from occurring, but we can surely try to shut it off as soon as possible. So use nutrition as a way to turn off that pain signal. Use foods that are rich in color and in anti-inflammatory properties. And remember, activity, physical activity, just taking a walk on the beach or taking a walk with your dog is wonderful as a pain-reducing signal. And if you can, layer in some strength with some resistance training and flexibility and mobility exercises with the help of a trained professional. And then when you feel up to it, take it up a notch and get into cardiovascular exercise, high-intensity interval training. But again, work with your provider so that they can make sure you're doing it safely. And always remember that after a good meal or a good exercise regimen, it's good to take time to rest and relax. And this is the way that we can actually start making informed decisions on which way we want to move that pain slider. Do we want to move towards the badness side, pushing pain towards a long-term problem? I don't think so. Most of us do not want badness in our life for the sake of badness. We kind of know it's not good for us. But in the world of pain, it's going to push you into having pain more often, becoming dependent on medications possibly, and not getting that quality of life that you want in your 20s, 30s, into your 60s, into your 80s. Use goodness. Use that mnemonic. Get your mess in order so that you can get your ness in order, right? When you are with it mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually, it's so much easier to behave, if you will, with your nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress goals. So some of you might be thinking, my goodness, I can't imagine exercising or moving. Well, luckily, there are evidence-based nutraceuticals that will help turn down that inflammation signal and help with the tissue repair processes. So talk to your clinician to see if one of those might be right for you at this point in your journey. And so we've talked about a lot of things, and there are so many opportunities for us to take it a step further. We look forward to answering some of your questions on the goodness paradigm and how you can use it to really start to reduce and eliminate your pain so you can get back to that wonderful life that you so much deserve.